The galactic conquered had ruled the stars for 40,000 years. 12 ancient species had joined together long ago to bring peace to the universe. Their ships patrolled every corner of known space. Their diplomats solved every conflict. Their scientists understood secrets that younger races could not even imagine. They believed they were the guardians of all life. They were wrong. High Counselor stood in the grand chamber of the conquered assembly. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her silver scales had seen empires rise and fall, but she had never seen anything like the images on the screens before her. They had come. No one knew where they came from. They simply appeared one day, tearing holes in the fabric of reality itself. They were not like any enemy the conquered had ever faced. They were not soldiers or conquerors. They were something far worse. They were living darkness. They were hunger given form. They moved through space like shadows, and everything they touched simply stopped existing. The first world to fall was Prime. 10 billion souls lived there, the came in the night. By morning there was nothing left, not ruins, not bodies, not even dust, just empty space where a planet used to be. The conquered sent its mightiest fleet to stop them, 3,000 warships, commanded by the greatest admirals in the galaxy. They found a Leviathan drifting near the system. It was the size of a small moon, a mass of writhing darkness that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. The fleet opened fire, plasma beams, nuclear missiles, gravity weapons, everything the conquered had built over thousands of years. The weapons hit their target, and they did nothing. The beams passed through the creature like light through smoke. The missiles vanished into its body without explosion. The Leviathan did not even seem to notice. Then it attacked. Tendrils of darkness reached out across the void. Ships that cost billions to build and took decades to construct were simply erased. Crews of thousands vanished without a scream. In less than an hour, the greatest fleet in galactic history was gone. After that, the dying began in earnest. World after world fell silent. The spread across the galaxy like a plague. They could not be stopped. They could not be reasoned with. They could not even be understood. The conquered scientists studied them desperately, but every probe they sent was consumed. Every theory they developed proved wrong. Counselor watched the death toll climb higher each day. Billions became tens of billions. Tens of billions became hundreds of billions. Ancient civilizations that had existed since before the conquered was formed simply ceased to exist. The other counselors argued endlessly. Some wanted to flee to distant galaxies. Some wanted to surrender and hope they would show mercy. Some had simply given up and waited for the end. But remembered something. Deep in the archives of the conquered, there was a device that had never been used. It was built in the earliest days of the Alliance, when the founders still feared that someday they might face a threat beyond their power to defeat. They called it the Universal Beacon. The beacon could send a message across every frequency, every dimension, every plane of existence. It would reach not just this galaxy, but every corner of reality. If anyone anywhere could help them, the beacon would find them. Many counselors thought it was foolish. Who could possibly answer? The conquered was the most advanced civilization in the known universe. If they could not defeat who could? But was desperate. She activated the beacon herself. The message was simple. To any who hear this, we are the galactic conquered. We are dying. An enemy we cannot defeat is destroying our worlds. Please help us. The message went out into the void, and the universe was silent. Days passed, then weeks. They continued their advance. More worlds died. Hope faded like a candle in the wind. Then on the 31st day, a reply came. It came from a region of space that the conquered had marked as forbidden long ago. The charts called it the quarantine zone. Inside that zone was a single star system with a small yellow sun and a blue-green planet third from its center. The conquered had discovered the natives of that planet 10,000 years ago. They were primitive creatures, short-lived, fragile. They fought among themselves constantly. They had barely mastered fire when the Conquered found them. The Conquered had debated what to do with them. Some wanted to uplift them, to teach them the ways of advanced civilization. Others wanted to study them like animals in a zoo. In the end, they simply built a barrier around the entire system and forgot about them. The primitives were not worth the trouble. The species was called human. Counselor read the reply with trembling hands. The message was short and direct. Message received. We have analyzed your data on the enemy, calculating transit vectors now. Estimated arrival time 4 standard days. Hold the line, we are coming. The other counselors did not believe it. The humans, those primitive creatures from the quarantine zone, they had been isolated for 10,000 years. They probably still lived in caves and hunted with spears. What could they possibly do against the... But notice something strange in the message. The humans had said they analyzed the data. That meant they had technology advanced enough to decode Conquered transmissions. They mentioned transit vectors. That meant they had faster-than-light travel, and they spoke with a confidence that seemed almost impossible given the situation. She ordered her archivists to search for any recent information on the human species. What they found made her blood run cold. The quarantine barrier had been damaged in a cosmic storm 300 years ago. For 3 centuries, the humans had been free to observe the galaxy, and they had been very busy. The archivists found traces of human activity across dozens of systems, hidden outposts, concealed sensor networks, ships that moved too fast to track. The humans had been watching the Conquered for hundreds of years, learning, preparing, and building something in the darkness beyond known space. Counselor stared at the star map. Somewhere out there, the species they had dismissed as primitive was coming to save them. She did not know what they would bring. She did not know if they could succeed. But for the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, Admiral stood in the war room of Unified Terran Command. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen more battles than she could count. Around her, dozens of officers watched holographic displays that showed the death of a galaxy. Red dots marked worlds that had fallen to the... There were so many red dots now that parts of the map looked like they were bleeding. Blue dots showed the remaining Conquered forces, scattered and retreating. The numbers told a simple story. The galaxy was dying. General, a large man with a face, broke the silence. They ignored us for 10,000 years. They put a wall around our entire solar system like we were animals in a cage. They called us primitives. And now they are begging, said another officer. Admiral raised her hand. The room went quiet. I understand your anger, she said. The Conquered treated us poorly. They decided we were not worth their time. They locked us away and forgot about us. She paused and looked around the room. But that is not the question we must answer today. The question is simple. Do we watch billions die when we have the power to save them? No one spoke. We have spent 300 years preparing for this moment, continued. We built our fleet in secret. We developed weapons that the Conquered cannot imagine. We trained our soldiers to fight enemies that should be impossible to defeat. We did all this because we knew that someday, something would threaten not just us but everyone. She pointed at the map. That day has come. They do not care that the Conquered was cruel to us. They do not care about politics or history. They will consume everything in their path, and when they finish with the Conquered, they will come for us. General nodded slowly. So we fight. We fight, Admiral agreed. Not for revenge, not for recognition. We fight because it is the right thing to do. We fight because that is what humans do. The vote was taken. It was unanimous. Within hours, the signal went out to every hidden base in the solar system and beyond. In the asteroid belt, where humanity had built shipyards that no alien sensor could detect, lights began to flicker on. Engines that had been cold for years began to warm up. crews that had trained their entire lives for a moment they hoped would never come rush to their stations. The dreadnoughts woke up. Each ship was a fortress of metal and fire. They were 15 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could survive the heart of a star. Their names were taken from human history, from legends of courage and defiance. Prometheus, Defiance, Unconquered Sun, Iron Will, Final Dawn, and at the center of the forming fleet, the greatest ship ever built by human hands, the flagship Terra Eternal. Terra Eternal was not just a ship, it was a statement. 20 kilometers from bow to stern, it carried enough firepower to fight a small war by itself. Its hull was made from materials that did not exist in nature, forged in laboratories that pushed the boundaries of physics. Its crew numbered 50,000, and every single one of them had volunteered for a mission they might not survive. Admiral took her place on the bridge of Terra Eternal. Through the viewports, she could see the other dreadnoughts falling into formation. 300 of the greatest warships ever created, each one crewed by men and women ready to give their lives for strangers who had never shown them kindness. Behind the dreadnoughts came the support fleet, 10,000 smaller vessels, carriers filled with fighter craft, hospital ships ready to treat the wounded, supply ships carrying enough ammunition to fight for years, troop transports holding 50 million soldiers, the finest warriors humanity had ever produced. Commander second in command approached her chair. "All ships report ready, Admiral. The fleet is yours." Nodded, she opened a channel to every ship in the armada. "This is Admiral. In a few minutes, we will fold space and travel to the heart of conquered territory. We will face an enemy that has destroyed everything it has touched, an enemy that has never been defeated, an enemy that does not know fear or mercy." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The beings we are going to save do not know us. They locked us away because they thought we were too primitive, too violent, too dangerous. They were wrong about the first two, but they were right about the third. We are dangerous. We are the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever seen, and today we will prove it." The crew of Terra Eternal stood. In ships across the fleet, humans of every nation and background felt the same fire building in their hearts. "The universe sent a cry for help," continued. "They did not know who would answer. They did not know that for 300 years we have been watching, learning, and preparing. They did not know that when the darkness came, humanity would be ready." She took a deep breath. "All ships engage fold drives. Let us go and introduce ourselves." The fold drives were humanity's greatest achievement. While the Conquered used warp engines that pushed ships through space, the fold drive simply stepped around it. One moment you were in one place. The next moment you were somewhere else, as if the distance between had never existed. Space began to ripple around the fleet. Reality bent and twisted as 300 dreadnoughts and 10,000 support ships prepared to cross half a galaxy in an instant. Then, with a flash of light that briefly the sun, the human armada vanished from the Sol system. On Earth, people looked up at the sky. They knew what had just happened. Their sons and daughters, their brothers and sisters, their mothers and fathers, had just left to save a galaxy that had abandoned them. Some prayed, some cried. Some simply stood in silence, proud of what humanity had become. Far away, in the dying heart of the Conquered, the survivors of 100 fallen worlds waited for a miracle. They did not know that their miracle was already on its way. They did not know that 300 mountains of human steel and fury were folding through space toward them. They did not know that help was coming. But they would learn, very soon. Fleet Commander had accepted death, his ships were broken, his crews were exhausted, and the monster before him could not be killed. The Battle of Prime had lasted for 3 days. 800 conquered warships had gathered here for a final stand. It was the largest fleet the Conquered had assembled since the war began. Military leaders had believed that if they combined their strength, they might finally hurt a Leviathan. They were wrong. The Leviathan hung in space like a wound in reality. It was the size of a small moon, a mass of writhing darkness that seemed to swallow the light from nearby stars. Had watched it destroy half his fleet without apparent effort. His weapons did nothing. His shields meant nothing. His ships were simply being erased, one by one. Now less than 300 vessels remained, clustered around the planet they had sworn to protect. Prime was home to 4 billion souls. When the fleet fell, they would be next. Looked at the faces of his bridge crew. They were afraid, but they had not run. They would die fighting as conquered officers should. He was proud of them. All ships, he said quietly, prepare for final engagement. It has been an honor to serve with you. Then the sky split open. It was like watching reality tear itself apart. A crack of pure white light appeared behind the Leviathan, and from that crack came ships. Ships unlike anything had ever seen. They were massive beyond belief, each one dwarfing the largest conquered vessel like a mountain dwarfs a stone. They emerged in perfect formation, one after another, until 300 giants filled the void. Sensor officer made a sound that was half gasp, half prayer. "Commander, I am reading weapons systems on those ships that should not exist, power signatures that exceed anything in our databases. What are they?" Before could answer, his communication system activated. A human voice filled the bridge, calm and confident. "Conquered Fleet, this is Admiral of the Terran Armada. We received your distress call. We suggest you pull back and let us handle this." The Terran Armada, the humans, the primitives from the quarantine zone, they had actually come. Stared at the impossible ships before him. "Admiral, we appreciate your assistance, but our weapons cannot harm this creature. What can you possibly do that we have not tried?" He could almost hear the smile in her response. "Watch and learn." The dreadnought at the front of the human formation was named Prometheus. It was 15 kilometers of gleaming metal and hidden death. As the Leviathan turned toward these new arrivals, Prometheus opened fire. A beam of light erupted from the human ship, but it was not like any weapon had seen before. It burned with the intensity of a star. It was, he would later learn, exactly that. The humans called it a stellar lance. They had found a way to capture the fire of suns and focus it into a weapon. The beam struck the Leviathan. For the first time in the entire war, a screamed. The sound was not heard in space. There was no air to carry it, but every being within 1,000 kilometers felt it in their minds. A cry of shock and pain and something that might have been fear. The Leviathan, the immortal monster that had destroyed worlds without effort, was burning. The human fleet moved like a single organism. More stellar lances fired from a dozen ships, pinning the Leviathan in place with walls of artificial sunlight. Then came the torpedoes. The humans called them reality anchors. They struck the Leviathan and detonated, and wherever they hit, the creature became solid. Its darkness became matter. Its immunity became weakness. It could no longer shift between dimensions. It could no longer let attacks pass through its form. It was trapped in normal space. And in normal space, it could be killed. Human fighter craft swarmed out of carrier ships by the thousands. They were small and fast and piloted by men and women whose minds were directly linked to their machines. They dove into the gaps in the Leviathan's form, deploying charges that collapsed its internal structure. They died by the hundreds, but they never stopped coming. The great dreadnoughts continued their assault. Prometheus, Defiance, Iron Will, they fired again and again, their weapons tearing chunks out of the creature that had seemed so invincible. The Leviathan thrashed and screamed, trying to escape, trying to flee back to whatever dimension had spawned it. But the reality anchors held it firm. It took 3 hours. When it was over, the Leviathan was dead. Its massive corpse drifted in space, already beginning to dissolve. Around it, the human fleet regrouped, battered but unbroken. They had lost ships. They had lost lives, but they had won. sat in his command chair, unable to speak. Around him, his crew wept with relief. They had been certain of death, and instead they had witnessed a miracle. His communication system activated again. Conquered fleet, the threat is neutralized. We are dispatching medical and engineering teams to assist with your wounded and damaged vessels. Please provide coordinates for any civilian populations that require evacuation. The humans were not just warriors realized. They were rescuers. They had come not just to fight but to help. Within hours, human shuttles filled the space around the conquered fleet. Human doctors, using medical technology that the conquered had never seen, treated wounded aliens whose biology they had only read about in books. Human engineers repaired damage that conquered technicians said was beyond fixing. Human soldiers stood guard over refugee ships, their weapons ready to face any threat. High Counselor arrived on the flagship Terra Eternal to meet Admiral in person. The old alien looked at the human woman with eyes that held a mixture of shame and wonder. "We quarantined your species," said. "We dismissed you as primitives. We left you alone for 10,000 years. Why would you help us?" Admiral looked at the counselor. There was no anger in her eyes, no satisfaction, only a calm certainty that seemed to come from somewhere deep in the human soul. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "That is what humans do." Had no response. She simply bowed her head, a gesture of respect that her species had not shown to anyone in thousands of years. The war was far from over. There were many, and they would not stop coming. But for the first time since the nightmare began, the galaxy had hope. The humans had arrived. The war for the galaxy lasted 2 years. Every day brought new battles. Every week brought new losses. And through it all, humanity refused to break. Admiral stood in the command center of Terra Eternal, studying the galaxy map. So much had changed since they arrived. The scattered survivors of the conquered had around the human fleet. Species that had not fought a war in centuries now trained alongside human soldiers. Scientists from a dozen worlds worked together in laboratories aboard human ships, searching for new ways to hurt the. But the enemy was vast. The Leviathan they killed at Prime was just one of hundreds. Smaller creatures numbered in the thousands. And they kept coming, pouring through dimensional rifts that opened without warning across the galaxy. Commander approached with a status report. His face was tired. Everyone was tired now. The 7th Fleet reports another rift opening near the system. 3 Leviathans and approximately 200 lesser entities. Fleet Commander is engaging. Nodded was good, one of the best, but 3 Leviathans at once was a hard fight for anyone. Send the unconquered Sun and Defiance to support him, and tell the conquered forces in that sector to evacuate civilians immediately. Hesitated. "Admiral, if we send those ships to, we will have nothing left to defend the supply lines to Prime." "Then we will defend them ourselves." His voice was firm. "Terra Eternal will hold the line until support returns." This was the reality of the war. There was never enough. Never enough ships, never enough soldiers, never enough time. The humans stretched themselves across a galaxy, trying to be everywhere at once, trying to save everyone they could. They could not save everyone. The dreadnought Iron Will died defending a convoy of refugee ships. The convoy held 3 million civilians from 6 different species, fleeing a world that was about to be consumed. A Leviathan appeared from nowhere, directly in their path. Iron Will moved to intercept. Captain knew his ship could not win. One dreadnought against a Leviathan with no support was suicide. But if he ran, 3 million innocent beings would die. He did not run. Iron Will fought for 4 hours. It destroyed 200 lesser. It wounded the Leviathan badly enough that the creature could not pursue the convoy. And when its weapons were empty and its shields were failing, Captain ordered his crew to overload the reactor. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. It tore the Leviathan apart. It bought the convoy enough time to escape. 12,000 humans died on iron will. They died so that 3 million strangers could live. Stories like this happened again and again as the war continued. The unconquered sun was crippled saving a world called Four. The people of Four had once voted to keep humanity quarantined forever. They had called humans dangerous animals who should never be allowed among civilized species. When they came for their world, those same humans fought and bled to protect them. The captain of Unconquered Sun, a woman named Sarah Cole, lost both her legs in the battle. When the survivors of Four came to thank her, she simply smiled. "You were wrong about us," she said, "but that does not mean you deserve to die." The conquered watched all of this with growing amazement. They had spent thousands of years believing they were the most advanced, the most civilized, the most noble species in the universe. Now they saw what true nobility looked like. It looked like humans. High Counselor wrote in her private journal every night. Her words would later be published across the galaxy. "I do not understand humans," she wrote. "They are short-lived. A human who lives 100 years is considered old. We live for thousands of years, and yet these brief creatures accomplish more in their short lives than we accomplish in our long ones. They burn so brightly because they know they have so little time." She wrote about human stubbornness, how they refused to retreat even when mathematics said they had already lost, how they held positions that should have been impossible to defend, how they kept fighting through injuries that would have killed any conquered soldier. "Their bodies are fragile," she wrote, "but their spirits are made of something stronger than any material we have ever discovered. They simply will not give up. They do not know how." She wrote about human creativity, how their generals devised strategies that conquered tactical computers called illogical, but which proved devastatingly effective, how their scientists made breakthroughs in days that should have taken decades, how they solved problems by refusing to accept that the problems were unsolvable. "We spent 10,000 years building the greatest civilization in the galaxy," wrote. "The humans spent those same 10,000 years fighting each other, surviving disasters and struggling against their own limitations. We thought this made them primitive. We were fools. It made them strong. They have been training for this war since the beginning of their existence." But the war took its toll on humanity as well. Admiral grew older. The gray in her hair spread. The lines on her face deepened. She had started this war as a warrior. Now she felt like a mourner, carrying the weight of every soldier who had died under her command. She read every casualty report personally. She memorized the names of every ship they lost. At night, when she should have been sleeping, she walked the corridors of Terra Eternal, looking at the faces of her crew, wondering how many of them she would lose tomorrow. Commander found her one night, standing alone in an observation deck, watching the stars. "You should rest, Admiral." "How can I rest when there is still so much to do?" Stood beside her. "The conquered is amazed by us. They think we are fearless. They think we do not feel the weight of what we are doing. They are wrong." "I know," paused. "I think that is what makes us human. We feel the weight, we carry the fear, and we keep fighting anyway." Was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. "One more day. That is all we can promise. We will fight one more day and then another and then another, until this war is over or we are all gone." She turned from the window. "Now let us see what tomorrow brings." Tomorrow would bring the discovery that changed everything. The scientists made their discovery on a quiet morning, 2 years into the war. Doctor, the chief researcher aboard Terra Eternal, ran into Admiral's quarters without knocking. Her eyes were wild with excitement and fear. "We found it," she said. "We found where they are coming from." The dimensional rifts were not random. They were not natural events. They all originated from a single point at the very edge of the galaxy, a wound in the fabric of space and time itself, older than the stars. They were not invaders. They were symptoms of this wound. As long as it remained open, they would keep coming. Forever. but the wound could be closed. Human scientists had developed a device called a reality seal. It was based on the same technology as their reality anchor torpedoes, but on an unimaginably larger scale. If they could place it at the heart of the wound, it would close the rift permanently. They would be cut off from their source. Without new creatures emerging, the remaining ones could be hunted down and destroyed. There was one problem. The wound was defended. Dozens of leviathans surrounded it, along with thousands of lesser. They swirled around the rift like antibodies protecting an infection. Any fleet that tried to reach it would be destroyed. Admiral studied the sensor data for a long time. Then she looked up at her officers. "Prepare the fleet for final deployment." Commander stepped forward. "Admiral, this is a suicide mission. Even with everything we have left, we cannot fight through that many enemies. Anyone who goes will not come back." "I know," his voice was steady. "That is why we will call for volunteers only." The call went out across the human fleet. The response was immediate. Every single ship volunteered, every single soldier, every single crew member. When asked who would die to save the galaxy, all of humanity raised their hands. In the end, she took 93 dreadnoughts and 3,000 support vessels. It was everything they had left. The rest would stay behind to protect the civilians and continue the fight if they failed. But they would not fail. The night before departure, something unexpected happened. Conquered ships began arriving at the rally point. Warships from all 12 elder species, battered and worn from 2 years of war, formed up alongside the human fleet. High Counselor appeared on admirals. "You taught us something, Admiral. You taught us that some things are worth dying for. If humanity goes to face the end, the conquered will stand beside you." Smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in months. "Welcome to the party, Counselor." The combined fleet set out at dawn. The journey to the wound took 3 days. 3 days of silence and preparation. 3 days of goodbyes sent home and prayers whispered in the dark. Humans and aliens walked the corridors together, sharing meals and stories. The differences that had separated them for 10,000 years seemed small now. They were all just people going to face the same darkness. They reached the wound on the morning of the 4th day. It was worse than the sensors had shown. The wound hung in space like a tear in reality, a spiral of pure darkness that seemed to pull at the soul. Around it swirled the greatest concentration of ever seen. Dozens of leviathans, thousands of lesser creatures, enough darkness to swallow stars. Admiral stood on the bridge of Terra Eternal. Her crew was silent. Everyone knew what was coming. "All ships," she said quietly, "this is what we came for. On my command we push for the center. We do not stop. We do not turn back. Whatever happens, the device reaches the wound. That is all that matters." She took a breath. "Begin attack." The Battle of the Wound was the greatest engagement in galactic history. Dreadnoughts that had survived 2 years of war were torn apart in the first hour. Leviathans fell under the combined fire of human and conquered weapons, but more took their place. Ships sacrificed themselves to clear paths, their crews dying so others could push forward. The dreadnought Prometheus was the first to fall, drawing the attention of 3 Leviathans to let others slip past. Defiance followed, its captain ramming his dying ship into a Leviathan's heart. Final Dawn was consumed by a swarm of lesser, but not before destroying hundreds of them. One by one, the great ships died, but with each death, the fleet pushed closer to the wound. After 7 hours, only 3 dreadnoughts remained: Terra Eternal, Unconquered Sun, and one other. The wound was close now, close enough to touch. "Admiral," Commander's voice was calm. "Unconquered Sun reports critical damage. They are losing power." Looked at the wound, so close, just a little further. "Tell them to transfer their crew to us. We will carry the device the rest of the way." "There is no time. They are closing in." Captain Cole's voice crackled over the communication system. Admiral, go, we will hold them here. Deliver the device. End this. Closed her eyes for just a moment, then she nodded. All ahead full, get us to the wound. Behind them, Unconquered Sun made its final stand. Captain Cole, still missing both her legs, commanded from her chair as her ship fought the entire swarm alone. They lasted 11 minutes. Long enough. Terra Eternal reached the heart of the wound. Around them, reality screamed. The fabric of existence itself seemed to resist their presence, but the human ship pushed through. Deploy the device, ordered. The reality seal launched from Terra Eternal's hold. It struck the center of the wound and activated. Light exploded outward, pure and clean and impossibly bright. The wound began to close. The screamed. Cut off from their source, they began to dissolve. The leviathans thrashed and faded. The lesser creatures simply vanished like shadows in sunlight. But the wound was collapsing, and Terra Eternal was still inside. Commander looked at Admiral. We cannot escape in time. I know, watched the light spread across the dying wound, but we won. The wound closed. Terra Eternal, and everyone aboard, vanished with it. The galaxy survived. In the years that followed, monuments rose on 1,000 worlds. The names of human ships were taught to children of every species. The phrase, "hold the line," became universal, spoken in 100 languages. On Earth, in a garden built where the old command center once stood, a simple stone marker bore an inscription that visitors came from across